Badger fans, let's get with Curtis on. We're going to talk about Purdue game coming up. Is it a get-right game? Should we expect this team to win by a lot or comfortably this weekend? And if we don't get that, should we be more worried? Plus, let's get a final recap on USC, on Wisconsin. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's get Curtis Holland on. Final thoughts on the USC game. I think the general game has been dissected quite a bit, but I think there's a particular kind of few moments that you want to break down in that game as we move into Purdue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously the game has been talked about ad nauseum the last few days. Definitely given me flashbacks of a couple of Big Ten championships, Penn State and Ohio State. That's tough to see. Overall, I think, kind of like what we talked about last week, I thought that our offensive line would have some opportunities to create some space in the run game. I think you saw that early. I also thought that our defense could get to Miller Moss and make some plays. And kind of the game came down to, could we get to Miller Moss before he had enough time to find one of his receivers on the back end open? And it just so happens that when you play 80 snaps of defense and, you have a bunch of NFL receivers, like those windows, those time windows are really, really tight. And credit to Miller Moss and them. They did a really good job clawing back in that game. But one thing I'll say is there was 2 drives to me, and this is way even before the 4th and 1 conversion that everybody's talked about as the moment of the game, that I think where we really lost the initiative. And the first one was right before the half. We have the ball back 4 minutes going down the field, right? We had just scored a 7-play, 75-yard drive in which I think our offenses might have looked the best it's ever looked under Longo in that pure section. And we're going right down the field again. We get to about, I think it was like the 40, 50. I don't quite remember where it was on the field. And it was second down and 10, and we had Pauling wide open on a seam in the middle of the field. And either Pauling just slowed down too much, or maybe Braden put a little bit too much on it and dropped the ball incompletion. And that basically capped our drive because we didn't get the 3rd down after that. If we complete that pass, we're scoring on that drive. At minimum 3, maybe 7. I mean, they hadn't been able to stop us yet up until that point. Their defense hadn't made any adjustments. If we go up, 20, that would put us 28 to 10 going into halftime. We get the ball back. We still have momentum. The first drive of the second half, we get the ball back again. Can we get down the field? Can we put up points? At that point, USC hadn't stopped us yet. If we were to score even there or even do a little bit more, we blow that team out and USC doesn't come back. And the reason I say that is because their first drive of the second half, everybody says, oh, they made the second half adjustments. Their first drive, 3 straight incompletions, 3 and out. And Moss was stepping off the field looking like he was done. He had been knocked to the ground a million times. Dude was beat up. I mean, you saw at the end of the game. If anything else, USC knows they played us on Saturday. That team was beat up by the end of that game. But you could just see in his body language. He looked like he was defeated. He looked like he was down. He didn't look like a guy who would inspire confidence to lead a comeback until we muffed the punt. And everything changed, right? So what are you going to do? I mean, look, here's the thing. This team is not perfect. Our team is not perfect. We still got a lot of things to do to get better. And hopefully we can do that this week versus Purdue.
Let me hit on one thing there, because that Pauling drop will haunt me for a while. You need your better players to make better plays. And that's on offense and defense, right? We saw Wohler, and I bet you Wohler would be the first person to come up here and say, I need to make a tackle on Miller Moss in space.
Oh, absolutely. And
he's going to make the tackle most of the time.
I mean, that was after what? I mean, he had played, I think him and Zachman played literally every snap the whole game, and so it's one of those things where it's like, I guess Miller Moss played every snap too, but it's still a lot. He's running in coverage. He's covering NFL wide receivers. I mean, think about this, Ryan. This is crazy. I was thinking about this today. So if we were to say September All-American wide receivers, right? Maybe you'd have 4, maybe you have 3, 4. I'd say the 4 would be Travis Hunter,
probably
Zachariah Branch,
Ryan Williams,
and then maybe Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State. We
Yeah,
played 2 of those guys. And then if you go to second team, you probably got Jacoby Lane on there. You might have Deuce Robinson on there. You might have
Bernard, the Alabama receiver, the one.
Kendrick Law or Jermaine Bernard, whatever one. And so we have played basically the All-America team of wide receivers up until this point this season.
That's true.
By the way, probably the Heisman candidate quarterback in Jalen Milroe. So, I mean, and you look at how our defense has played the last few weeks. I mean, again, we are undersized. We need some people on the defensive line. I think Brian Smith talked about it yesterday. You need a game wrecker. We don't have that just yet, although Hills is quickly becoming, I think, our best defensive lineman.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tall ask. It's a tall ask to do what we did against USC, when we don't have anybody that can consistently wreck plays and get to the quarterback. You're asking our secondary to hold up in coverage against straight up NFL dudes. And they did it for what it's worth. The difference was one guy's 6'4" and our guy was 6'1", and it's 3 inches of difference. And that's all USC needed to make those.
Well, and that's 2 touchdowns, right? It's the Wooler one and the one on Lucas, where they just have a 6'4" guy there. And this isn't, I want to be clear that was not me picking on Wooler. It's just like at some point you need your best playmakers to make and that's on Pauling too. Like Pauling's your best receiver. You can't drop that. You can't drop that pass. And he would tell you that.
And Pauling's had a little case of the dropsies so far.
Yes.
So hopefully, he starts to get that sorted out.
Well, let's shift to Purdue, because I think the big thing here is like watching some of Purdue, looking statistically, this could be a get right game for the Badgers. You're going from Bama, USC to Purdue. I think you have a chance to run all over them. Is Wisconsin good enough to have a get right game?
So, it's tough to say. And the reason I say that is because up until this point in the Fickle, era, I guess you could say, I have yet to see a game where I felt, we played 4 quarters of that game. I've seen games where we've come out hot in the first half. Purdue last year, we came out smoking in that game, right? And we were up 21-3 at halftime or something like that. And then, there was games where we've had really good second halves. Nebraska last year, where we were down, 14-3, and we came storming back and won in overtime, right? Or, Minnesota, we get down early, we come back and win that game. Like, I've seen games where we've had really good second quarters. Last week, we scored 2 touchdowns, and that 7-play, 75-yard drive probably looked like the best I think I've seen our offense look since we've had Luke Fickell, maybe with the exception of the LSU game. And so, I've seen moments of our team playing at a very, very high level, but I haven't seen that strung together over the course of the whole game. And for me, that begs a couple different questions. First off, is it because we're just incapable of doing that? Do we not have the skill? Do we not have the endurance? And what, to me, when I look at that and say, I don't know if that's the case, is because the first few games, granted they were against weaker competition, we were at our best in the fourth quarter. Now, some might say, well, they were, undermanned, things like that. And that could be fair as well. But you saw that last year, too. In the second half of the season, there were times when we were at our best in the second half, right? Mm-hmm. Even when we got blown out against Northwestern, against Indiana, against Nebraska, and against Minnesota, we played our best ball in the second half. And that was the end of the year, right? So I don't think it's the endurance thing. So then you go, is it coaching, right? Maybe it is coaching, because there are some plays, and I know at this point a lot of people are questioning Longo. I totally understand. I think there's definitely some formations that I look at that I don't quite know what he's trying to accomplish. But then at the same time, he'll have a play here or there that's like, wow, that was an amazing play that worked super well and looked really awesome. So it's kind of like you get these weird kind of variants there. But when you actually look at the film, a lot of it is, again, players either maybe missing an assignment, missing a read. It's like one little thing here or there. And I think the problem is we're not quite, as a team, good enough yet such that we can overcome when 1 or 2 players makes a mistake on a play. And that's a problem, because that makes you unpredictable. I cannot have consistency if every single play 1 or 2 people makes a mistake and we're not good enough to overcome that. And that's kind of where I'm at with this offense. I think there's a lot there, because when you see it execute, and again, you saw this in the first half against USC, you saw this at times versus some of the other teams we played, we can be incredibly effective. The looks are there. The run blocks are there. The running backs, I think they need to step up, but they can be there. There's a lot of potential in that room. And so, again, to me, it's like we're not good enough where if we make a mistake on a play, we can come back from it yet, and that makes us inconsistent.
Yeah, and I think it's more of a coaching execution standpoint than having the horses to do it. Because I think consistently, and you pointed it out, you can see the highs on this team. The problem is there's highs and there's lows, there's ebbs and there's flows. We haven't been able to play at that consistent level for 4 quarters. I think it's a great point. But to me, if you can hit that point for a quarter, then you should be able to sustain it to some degree. And if you're not, it's either an execution thing, it's a players missing blocks thing, or it's a play calling schematic thing. Like, it's getting too cute sometimes. I think we're a victim at times of getting a little too cute, or using players in situations that doesn't make the most sense. You and I talked before the game, like the first play in that drive against USC, we're running kind of a crack toss to Tyree Walker. Tommy Walker's like a 4.65 guy. That's not his game. Run that to Dupree, run that to Yak, run that to Ches. Or you had the 3rd and 10 kind of swing pass to Jackson Aker. And you said blocking up in front of him. That's not the play you probably run to Jackson Aker. And I like it. I like Aker. His game's more
I agree. And I wonder, and this we talked about this a little bit before. That kind of begs the question to me where I'm wondering where the disconnect is, because when I listened to Longo, and even before Longo was our OC, when you would listen to him talk about what he did when he was at UNC, he talked about getting his playmakers in space. He talked about running air raid schemes with a running game. But the point of the air raid schemes is to get athletes in space and evenly distribute the football to everyone. And so in my mind, I think I'm not so much as mad at Longo as I am mad at the concepts of the air raid offense, because it kind of requires that everybody is about the same, because you need everybody to basically be able to do the same things, right? And the problem with that is when you have different types of personnel sets that maybe suit different types of situations, you can't call plays the same. You have to call plays that suit your players. And so then my question becomes, is Longo just calling these plays with everybody, whoever's in the game at any given time, because screw it, this is the play we're going to call? Or is he trying to, or is he not aware necessarily of who the players are in there? And that was something that we talked about. Fickle talked about getting guys in the rotation so they can get some consistency, right? And so my question then, my initial thought was that was directed at Devin Spalding. Now, I love Devin Spalding because I think he's a great coach. I think he's a great leader. I think the players love him. I think he's a great recruiter. I mean, he recruited our best running backs class ever, at least in terms of talent and like fighting against other teams. You know, obviously we've had really good players. I'm not going to write that off, but it's not like we were out recruiting Alabama for Jonathan Taylor, right? So, you know, but I don't know if he's at a point in his career yet where he can manage a room like this, because we have 7 guys that can legitimately play minutes and potentially be starters at other programs. And that's tough because you have a lot of mouths you got to feed. You got a lot of things you got to balance, promises that may or may not have been made. And so, you know, again, this is pure speculation. I have no inside knowledge on this whatsoever. I'm not trying to say anything. It's just kind of what I'm reading. I'm wondering if he's trying to play different guys, get different guys in there, trying to manage this room. And there's maybe a communication disconnect between what him and Longo are trying to do in terms of those rotations.
Yeah, I want to get into that in one second, because I think there's a lot to unpack there. Plus, more Purdue talk that's coming up next. We do have to take a quick break for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is the #1 source for basically all of your sports betting needs, whatever you need to do over at FanDuel. If you're an NFL fan, obviously that's going on. Baseball playoffs are going on. Basketball is going to be coming up. College football is obviously going on. Right now, you have a $5 bet. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. You can do a lot with $200 over at FanDuel.com. That's $200 guaranteed with your initial $5 bet. FanDuel.com is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network, the official sports book of what I use. Like, it's fast, it's easy, it's simple. As always, please do it responsibly. But they have your parlays, teaser, spreads, every type of action that you're used to that you want is over at FanDuel. Easy, fast, simple to use. FanDuel.com, the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's get back into this. Let's shift to Purdue a little bit. And I want to go here. Like, Purdue is maybe the worst team in the Big Ten. Like, they are objectively terrible. And I think this Badger team, for so many reasons, man, we just talked about it, and you're right. They haven't put together 4 quarters in like a year. It's hard to go, like, at some point, trust who, like, there's an old saying, if someone shows you who they are, trust them, right? The Badgers have kind of showed us who they are, and we should probably just trust that. But I think for the psyche of the fan base, the psyche of the team, for momentum going forward, I think you got to beat this team and not beat them 20-17. I think you got to be up 14 points at halftime, get a win by 20, because they're bad.
Cover at minimum.
You have to cover, and not just cover. Like, you have to. I'll use a different word. You have to look like you're in control. You have to look like you're in control of this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would go a long way in alleviating a lot of issues, because my biggest concern with this team, and my biggest thought up until this point, is what is this team's confidence level in itself, right? Because a football team plays better when it's confident. Iowa outperforms its expectations. One, they train really well, but they're confident in what they do because they know who they are. They have an identity. They play that identity. They're confident. They've repped it. They understand it, and they get a good defense out of it every year. That's what they do, right? They're confident. USC in the second half was confident last week because it had the momentum going into it, and it knew, hey, we got guys. Miller Moss is like, screw it, Jacoby Lane's down there somewhere and just throwing things, right? That's confidence, you know, and that comes from competency, right? And I think our team is very, very capable of being better than it is, but it hasn't shown itself, hasn't proven to itself that it can be competent. Those first 2 games hurt us in that way, right? I understand when people are saying, hey, we should beat these teams by a lot of points. What that I think does, and what I think they're trying to say is, and apologize, my wife's coming home. My dog is going crazy. I think what those kind of games do and what maybe the fans are looking for is it establishes confidence in what you're doing. Okay, I know I can run this play and it can be successful. I know I can throw this deep ball. He can catch it. I have confidence that play is going to happen, right? I know that if I make this cut in a running game, I can cut it upfield and get 50 yards to a touchdown. Like I know I can do that. I don't think this team has had much success like that. And again, and I'm not trying to let this continue to beat us, but it reminds me of last year, the first deep ball to Skylar Bell where he dropped it. I think that set the tone for a lot of what happened last year. Because this team, now in the back of their head, oh, man, we're Wisconsin. We're not a passing team. We don't know how to catch deep balls. We don't know how to do these things, right? And that doesn't mean they couldn't do it. I mean, you see Skylar Bell right now. He's balling at UConn.
He's balling out, yeah.
He's balling, right? He's gonna transfer to a better school than UConn next year. So, but that just goes back to like what I said. I think this is a game where you have to establish that confidence. Now, going back and watching what we did to USC, the best feeling about watching Purdue and Nebraska last week is that those 2 teams, and I'm saying both Purdue and Nebraska, are so much slower than everything we've seen up until this point this year. I mean, it is watching Bama and then watching USC and then going to Purdue. It's like you're playing on half speed.
Yeah.
Like they can't move in space. Their D-line gets no push at all. Their corners are always getting beat and getting pass interference calls. Like they are just not even remotely close to the athletic caliber of what we've seen the last few weeks. And I think what we did to USC in the first half is exactly what we got to do to Purdue in the game. I think we come out, both halves, and credit to USC. I think Brian Smith mentioned this yesterday. They made some changes in the second half. Those changes basically amounted to they just started slanting more, and they played a lot of cover 3 and cover 6, which I think confused Locke because of how they lined up out pre-snap. I digress. When you look at Purdue, they can do that. It's not going to make a difference because they're just not physically capable at the level USC is. USC has really good pass rushers. I thought that before going in. I thought they had better pass rushers than Alabama. They don't have as good a run-stopping defensive lineman as Alabama, but they got better pass rushers. And so, I think that with Purdue, we can exploit that significantly more than we could against USC.
Yeah, the other thing I'd like to see, man, with Purdue, I'm not saying run the ball 75 times, but I kind of just want to see, let's lean on this thing. I know against USC, I wanted Braden Locke throw a little bit more early because I thought you needed him more in that game. I thought you would need to be more balanced. I want to see us run the ball. I want to see 2 or 3 guys, 2 guys get 100 yards. I want to see first down, second down, run the ball. I want to see a commitment to what we can do on the offensive front, and I don't think Purdue can stop it. Purdue's rush defense is trash. They are trash. And I don't think they're going to be able to stop it. And I don't want to get too cute. Like, yeah, Locke's going to have to throw the ball, man, but run the ball. Get a couple guys involved. Get 3 running backs involved. And then let Braden Locke get some open throws, build some momentum and confidence, and then salt the game away in the fourth quarter. Classic old school Badger football. That's what I want to see out of this new style. But I think it would go a long way towards setting up what you're going to see the next couple of weeks. And then there's a runway here. I've talked about it. There's a runway where you can be 5-2 heading into Purdue. That's not the craziest thing in the world. I know people have written that off, but it's not crazy.
No, I mean, again, it goes back to looking at the actual team, right? Versus listening to pundits and things like that. I watching this team back again, going back to even when we were talking about the consistency thing, we're right there. Like I get what Fickle's saying when he's like, hey, we're right there. Like we are right there. Again, we're one missed block away from housing a touchdown on a run play last week, or we're one stunt where a defensive player, just kind of undershoots Renfro a little bit. He's forced to back into Braden Locke throwing his pass off just a little bit on a deep ball. Like it's little things like that are stopping us from being successful. And again, USC to some degree was doing that by the skin of their teeth in the beginning of the third quarter last week. Obviously, once things started to go downhill, they got a lot better as the game went on. But it's those kinds of things that if we clean up a little bit, and again, those are things we can do. Like those are things that are within our control. If we can fix those things, then we can improve. And I'll say this, like I know we got 31 points scored on the defense last week. They played 82 snaps with 4 penalties. They played 86 snaps, right? Which is crazy. And they were right on the hip of these NFL wide receivers the whole game. There's not a team we play the rest of the season that can do that, like at all. And like not even Oregon. Oregon's got a bunch of small guys, but they're not going to body a Xavier Lucas or a Nizer Forkreen. They're not big enough. So like, there's not a team we play that can do what USC did to us. Now, our run game defense has to improve, but I trust our pass defense the rest of the season to hold out because again, we've already played the best receivers in the country. Like, and that's not really even arguable, I don't think. I mean, that's what's crazy about it. So we can hold up on the back end. So I feel good about that. I thought the defense, the front seven is starting to figure some things out as to who's who and who's what. I think you're going to see a lot more Hills coming up. That dude's got a mindset that's like, I don't really care what's going on. I'm going to make some things happen. You're going to see a little bit more Lane. I think you saw him a little bit more last week.
Yep.
I think the linebackers, I didn't watch too much of the defense yet. I do think the linebackers played better. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, we're right there. We're right on the edge. And the thing that gives me a lot of hope, kind of looking forward, maybe more so than the fan base, is that listen to the players talk. Listen to the family members of the players talk, right? They're the ones that are saying, hey, we're right there. We got this. We're right there. Like we're inches away. There's little things we got to fix. And all our goals are still within our sight. And to your point earlier today, we're 2-2. This is exactly what most people thought. I was a little low on USC and probably a little higher on our front seven than coming into the season. But we're 2-2. I don't think many people had us anything different than this coming into this point. We play Purdue. This is a get right game. Yeah. We're more talented than Rutgers is. They can run the ball well. They can't really throw it. I think, I'm not worried about their throw game. So if we can stem them a little bit, keep them between the 20s, then we can easily get some points on that defense and win that game. I won't say easily, but we can get some points on that defense and win that game. Northwestern, we should beat that team. It's in the lakefront. Crazy spooky voodoo, weird things happen on that stadium in that area. So, who knows? There's probably going to be like a mist come up from the lake or something, and you're going to see like the Loch Ness Monster on the sideline that messes our game up. But other than that, we have every reason in the world we should beat that team. And then you're coming into Penn State. Now you're 5-2. Maybe your offense is humming a little bit. Maybe your defense is feeling good. Yeah, you got some mojo. Probably a night game, Halloween game.
Yes. That's what this team is missing, man. Like, they just need to plaster a team a little bit. Like, they just need to put Purdue on their back, run over them, 38-14. In fact, we'll get to predictions next. And then you go into Rutgers and you're feeling yourself a bit. Like, people, these are people, man. They're humans. Like, how are you feeling at work if every day's a slog by you go in and you crush a meeting? Like, your next meeting's better. By the way, you got recruits in town. Like, that's helpful too. Get a big win in front of recruits. Don't win 20-17 against Purdue where the fans are like dying out of boredom, right? Like, so many things here. Just Purdue sucks. Like, I'm not going to take too much out of a big win against them. When I say big, I don't mean big in terms of like strategic sense, like the nation's going to take notice if you beat up on Purdue, but big in sense of controlling, fairly dominant. You look like the much better team. You look like a clean product, and you make Purdue look like the team they've looked like this year. All right, we got to take a break on that. I want your game prediction next on Locked On Badgers, plus a comment that we are the new Nebraska. I want to get your take on that as well, Curtis. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at our good buddies at GameTime. GameTime is the #1 source. I'm leaving Curtis up here because Curtis goes to a lot of games. I'm sure there's been a moment in his life where he's been frustrated by a ticket buying experience. At some point, he probably could have used GameTime. GameTime is the #1 source for all of your ticketing needs. If you're going to events, concerts, shows, I know Curtis is a higher evolved life form than I am. He probably goes to more concerts and shows than I do.
I don't go to a lot of concerts, honestly. But for games, yeah, absolutely.
I know you are. You talk liquor and all these things. Like, you are a higher life form than I am. I'm a more simple person. So whatever you're doing, though, go over to GameTime, get all your ticketing experiences, fast flash deals, cheaper as it gets closer. Ditch the stress, snag the tickets with GameTime, download the app, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off over at GameTime. All right, let's get back into this. Let's make some Purdue game picks, and then we'll finish off with this Nebraska comment. What is your prediction here? How do you think this is going to play out?
Yeah, so I think this game can probably go one of two ways, and I think we win either one. But you have the bad way and you have the good way. You start with the bad way. I think you come out a little slow, trying to figure some things out. I think that, Purdue did a really good job in the beginning of the game last week versus Nebraska, sort of stemming them. They were selling out to stop the run. They were getting a lot of PI penalties, but it was throwing off their throw game a little bit. And they did have a little bit of success getting to Dylan Raiola in the backfield in the first half of that game. And then Nebraska proceeded to miss like 5 field goals, which is wild. I think that was the hurricane effect. It was windy pretty windy here last week. So I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but there's a chance you come out, you're a little off, you don't really have a rhythm down. We're the things we talked about last week and some of the inconsistencies, you see that coming out the gate. But at the end of the day, we'll outlast them. We'll end up winning, kind of similar, probably in Nebraska, 28-10, something like that. That's the game I don't think any fan wants or anybody wants to see. That's a sign of, this not making a bowl thing is potentially real. You come out and play like that, that's problematic. On the flip side, you come out and play, your ass off like we came out last year when we played Purdue, and for some reason we came out like we were shot out of a cannon and got up 21-3 in the first quarter. I think that's on this team too. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for big chunk plays. I don't think it's necessarily hand the ball off, hand the ball off, hand the ball off, hand the ball off. I think it's hand the ball off, 2nd and 1, quick RPO. You got Will Pauling wide open in the middle of the field with no one anywhere near him. That happened a lot against USC. And if it happens against USC, probably going to happen against Purdue. So you see things like that where I think you can really exploit that. I have absolutely no idea what to expect from their offense. I don't think they knew what to expect from them even when they had Graham Harrell. So, I don't know what we'll see there. I'm going to make the assumption, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that their receivers are not quite as good as what we saw last week. Just a guess. Not sure. I haven't watched them that much, but I'm going to make that assumption. I don't think that they're going to have the same success that Miller Moss had. I don't think Purdue's offensive line is as good as USC's. I didn't think USC's was very good. I thought we could get some pressure on them, which we did. And, I will say this. The thing that gives me at least a little bit of solace in that loss was that USC is definitely feeling it this week. I don't know how they're going to perform at Minnesota. I think Miller Moss was concussed at the end of the game. He was knocked out, just all kind of over it. Their running back looked like he was getting up every time in pain. We were hitting them. So, that's aside. I just, at least we were physical. But I don't think that Purdue's offensive line is going to do much more than what USC was able to do. So I think we'll be able to get some pressure. Can they run the ball? I mean, I guess that's been the strength of their offense, but it hasn't looked too much better than us running the ball recently, to be honest. So, I look at them and on paper, this is a team we should demolish. And if we play our best game, we'll beat this team. We will finally cross that 40 burger spot that it's been so elusive since New Mexico in 2022, right? So I think if we come out playing like that, we're executing. Locke's got some confidence. He's making some good throws, some right throws. He's not throwing off his back foot. He's not, half throwing one way, half throwing the other way, indecisive in his decisions. Then I think we can have a good game. So it really just, like I said, it depends on how we come out and all these things that we've talked about. Again, like I'm not the coach here. I don't know all the answers, but these are things that I see, that I notice, and I think the fans see a lot of things too. And in full honesty, I think the coaching staff sees it. So can we fix these things?
I think it's going to be like 34-10, 34-13. It's in that range. I don't think we quite get to 40. I got to see this offense walk at a crisp pace before they run. Like they're not even really walking at a normal pace right now. So I think they're averaging 21 per game, get up to 34 against a Big Ten opponent, even in a good one. That's a big step to me. But I think they can get there. I think fans are going to hear this and say, that's ridiculous. When have they covered? When was the last time they looked like this? Purdue's bad. Purdue's really bad. And I think fans have maybe a tiny bit lost the context of no team in the country has probably just played back-to-back the quality of teams Wisconsin has played. And that impacts it.
Yeah, think about what Alabama did to Georgia in the first half.
Yeah.
I mean, it was at will. They scored at will. They did whatever they wanted. They could make every play they wanted to. We actually rushed the ball for more on Bama than Georgia did. I mean, go figure that. I have no idea how that happened, but that's what happened. So, yeah, it's a different world. And Alabama, I'm going to go out on a limb. I mean, they're in a different hemisphere than I think the rest of college football. And I'm just going to go out on a limb right now. I know it's early. I'm probably going to predict that we lose at Tuscaloosa next year.
That game could get so
going out on a limb. Just going out on a miniature log here and just kind of making that prediction a little early. But I mean, but that team, again, going back to, that's a different team, dude. I mean, that's not even remotely in the same ballpark of what we're talking about now. And quite frankly, I mean, you look at the defense for Purdue, they played slower than South Dakota's does. Like they do not look as athletic as South Dakota's defense. Like I'm just going to be honest about that. Like watching those games, it's like, man, they just do not move like that. They're definitely not as well coached, so that, I mean, that's glaringly obvious. So I'll say that I do think that we have a really good chance to make this a good Badger experience, give the fans a little something, kind of stem the bleeding a little bit and start to get back on track.
Let's get some mojo going, man, because that's going to be such a big deal going forth through this season as the harder second half of the schedule starts to come up. He is Curtis Holland. I am Ryan Herrings. This is Locked On Badgers. Definitely talk to you again later on Wisconsin beat Purdue.